Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sessions with Paola. And this is part 2 to an amazing conversation with Goddess Zenith. And if you haven't watched part 1, please go back and do that because we talked about embodiment. What is getting in the way of being in our body, and how can holistic therapy, embodiment therapy actually really help you? So in this part, we're going to talk a little bit more about you as a sexuality coach. We talked a little bit about space and consent and pleasure. And, it was interesting because between the two parts, we were talking about, okay, what our activity are we going to do? And I said, can I take my shoes off? And she's like, you don't need my permission. So isn't that interesting? Guys, that we're constantly looking around, asking for permission. So when we think a little bit about just doing what you want and going with what you feel, and that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that you do, Addison, is pleasure advocacy. Can you tell us what that means, how that works?
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. This is something that's new to me. This is something that I am discovering what it is, in the process of discovering. But for me, it means that when we look at all our identities, all the aspects of our identities, right? And we look at the parts that feel oppressed, right? That feel that because we are this way, it's automatically, we are marginalized, right? Because of this. That whole thing, right? It cuts us off from our pleasure. So leaning back into feeling good, joy, peace, right? Whatever that means in itself is taking our power back, right? So it's, not just, pleasure for pleasure's sake is great.
Yes.
But pleasure for revolutionizing, systemic oppression, I don't know. Maybe that's a kink I have, but it's a beautiful thing, right? It's deep. So, yeah.
And what's interesting when you talked about joy, how many of you out there, guys, when I ask this question, how do you feel joy in your body? What does it look like? What does it feel like? A lot of people can't answer that question. So I love this idea of leaning in.
Yeah.
And what does also pleasure mean to you? Because imagine another thing that we deal with culturally is internalized ideas of productivity, goal-oriented, financial freedom. I must get here by this amount of time. And that disrupts being in the present, listening to your sensations. So if we don't, I almost think it goes in steps. How do we learn to say no to the things that are constantly coming our way in order to be able to lean in? Because when we think about that idea of pleasure, people out there may have different definitions of what that means. But I think when you talk a little bit about joy and play and giving ourselves permission to do that, even when there's a lot of crappy things happening around us, we need that breather in order for us not to completely drown in everything that is constantly coming our way. So when you think about pleasure advocacy and any other things that come to your mind that you want to share with us, what are some ways in which people can start tuning in?
Yeah. I love how you started with the boundary, right? I think that identifying what are the barriers to my pleasure, right? So what are the things that get in the way? And I think that in part 1, we talked about how women tend to have a lot of mental load, right? Multitasking, things like that. So that could be one thing, right? Being in our heads because we have a long to-do list and there's no time, right? The idea of there's no time, the idea of there's too much to do, that's a barrier, right? So starting to identify what are the things that get in the way. And when we understand the body, we understand that if we're stressed out, if there's cortisol coursing through my body, I'm not going to be able to enjoy, right? Whatever it is that I want to enjoy. So starting with that. And then I would say, prioritizing pleasure. So as much as, work and responsibilities are important, so is pleasure, right? And so I always, ask my clients, what did you do for fun? What did you tell me about it, right? Because self-care can also become duty. Oh, I have to do my self-care. Well, now it's not fun.
Yes.
Right? So I think also reframing how we do fun, right? So those are some ideas.
I love it, because barriers, before you can implement what works for you, you got to understand what's getting in the way.
Yes.
And I love what you said, because social media is great, but sometimes
it's a barrier.
It's a barrier. It's like, if you want to get over PTSD, just do 3 things for like a month, and then no. Or they do self-care today. These are the things that you can do. So it becomes, okay, I need to schedule self-care versus, sometimes I'm exhausted. I usually work evenings, and sometimes I come home and do notes, but sometimes I just come home and I'm like, I don't feel like doing anything. And giving myself permission to do that, because are we ever going to be really caught up with everything that's coming our way, and accepting that that's okay? I think this idea of giving yourself permission and prioritizing, and what would that look like if you did?
Yes, absolutely. I think along with that, reframing it to, instead of a to-do list of things that I have to do to take care of myself, right? Like, can you make it a ritual? Like, I love the idea of ritual and having like a pleasure ritual, right? So it could be simple, right? For those of you that are like, oh, that's another, add it to the to-do list, I don't have time for that. It could be simple, right? It could be simple. It could be, engage the 5 senses, get a really yummy lotion that you massage into your hands at lunchtime every day. Simple, it's doable, right? So I also think building mastery, right, in pleasure, like start with something small, do that, and then build, right?
Building mastery. I love that concept, because these things can become really big, especially if you've been someone that has been living in survival for a really long time. When you've been living in survival for a really long time, you start to thrive and you don't know that you're even doing it. So how do we start little? And I'm such a big fan of being able to say, no thanks, not now. So I love everything that you're saying. Guys, in it, anything, any demonstrations or any little exercise that people can start with out there to kind of get or lean into their body, lean into their joy and pleasure?
Yeah, love it. So simple exercise, it's called pleasure-led mindfulness. Okay. So mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment, right? So we're paying attention to the body, right? So it is an embodied practice. Paying attention to what my body feels like right now in the moment, step 1, right? And then step 2, finding little moments of pleasure, little invitations of pleasure, right? So maybe that means taking off your shoes because they hurt. Maybe that means sitting back in my chair, right? So would you like to try it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. I was waiting for you to ask. I'm like, when is she gonna?
Give it a little explanation first.
All right.
So get comfortable.
Okay. Perfect.
Get comfortable. I'm going to get as comfortable as I can in this outfit. But,
yes. This is why I wear pants for this, because I'm like, I'm going to get comfortable.
If the camera wasn't on, it would be a different story. But, here we are. So, getting comfy. And, maybe that means, as we're already starting, right? So maybe that means listening to what your body feels right now. And if there's discomfort, then allowing yourself to move into a different position. Maybe you need to turn down the music. Maybe you need to, put your back against something, feel that contact. And just start to take some breaths here. I'm closing the eyes as I tune into my body. You don't have to. Do what feels right. And start to notice body sensations. Just noticing them. and labeling them in your mind. Maybe it's, I feel my racing heart. I feel the muscles of my back relaxing with every exhale. I feel my feet. And then noticing if there's any impulse, any movement impulse. And if there is, leaning into that with breath. If your body just wants to be still, that's okay too. But noticing the parts of the body that feel good right now, or neutral. And just hanging out there. Giving yourself permission to rest, permission to be. And then before we wrap up, just giving your body a thank you, offering yourself gratitude. There were any parts of the body or sensations that felt delicious, that felt good, that felt calm, saying thank you to those specific parts and sensations. And then as we transition to opening the eyes, bringing that awareness of those body parts and sensations with you. Yeah. And see if you can maintain that connection with your body, even with your eyes open. If they were closed.
Wow. I always love to close my eyes. Yeah. And when you were talking, I feel really comfortable, right? Like a really calming energy. But I could also notice that part of me that's acelerada. I like, so I'm like, wait, we're still. Yes. But then getting back into the moment and breathing, guys, breathing. I cannot emphasize it enough. I know that you also do breath work. Yes. Right? Like, but there is it's so important. And when you talked about, think about the parts that feel good, or what word you use, not gratitude, but you
offer that feel neutral.
Yes.
Yeah.
Neutral. I think I felt a lot of like here, like good, I'm doing something that I love. Your energy is just so calming. I like everybody in this room, and they're my people, my family. So it was so nice. And I hope you guys that, watch this again if you were a little bit distracted, and do it with us, because I think that this is one of the ways in which we can invite the body and seduce yourself back into the present moment. Garcina, thank you so much. Yes. So happy to have you guys. So for you that want to work with Goddess Zenith, where can they find you? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So if you're interested in mental health, you'll find me as Susana. And it'll be www.bodywisepsychotherapy.com is the website for my practice. Same thing for Instagram at Bodywise Psychotherapy. If you're interested in embodied sexuality coaching, then you can check out at Rewild Sexuality on Instagram.
Yes. And guys, don't forget to follow Goddess Zenith, because she does a lot of workshops. I think workshops are great. Groups of people and cohesiveness. So make sure that you follow her and that you are aware of the things that are coming up. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you all for tuning in. Love you. See you soon. Sessions with Paola. Muchas gracias, mi gente. Nos vemos pronto. Chao.